July 20th, 2020. It's Monday morning in Navassa, North Carolina. A small town just across the Cape Fear River from Wilmington.
It's a relatively small community in Brunswick County.
Population with about 2,000 to 3,000 people.
It's 95% African American, about 3% white and 2% Hispanic. But most of all, Navassa was a really nice place to live.
But this morning, one Navassa native, 23-year-old Kiana Graham, has gone missing.
Kiana worked as a correctional officer at the Pender Correctional Institution.
She was scheduled to work a mandatory overtime shift the night before.
But her mother gets a call saying that Kiana didn't come to work.
She was a newer employee, but she was a good employee.
The girl was always punctual, always on time, always where she's supposed to be.
This was very rare for her not to show up to work.
When Kiana's worried mother calls her, she gets no response.
This is Kiana, call me back.
Hey Kiana, why are you not picking up the phone?
Kiana lived with her mother. They were always in touch. And when she wasn't at work, she always picked up her phone.
This was just out of her habit, just to disappear and not let her mother know where she was.
A voice in the back of her head is telling her that something is terribly wrong.
Kiana was a young female working at this facility.
Her mother always had it in her head that working at a prison like this wasn't safe.
So she was nervous and she called the police to try to help her locate her daughter.
I need to file a missing persons report.
To everyone who knew her, Kiana Graham was a bright light.
She was a free spirit, easygoing, just loved people.
She was very likable, just a nice, giving, and caring person.
She and her mother were extremely close.
She was greatly loved.
She was very family-oriented.
And she was highly focused. After graduating high school, Kiana entered the workforce.
She worked at this home to help people with mental disabilities.
She was an avid worker.
But as much as she loved her job, it wasn't paying the bills.
She was living with her mom because cost of living is very high.
To gain her independence, Kiana knew she needed a better paying job.
She was taking classes to become a correction officer.
After completing her training, Kiana landed a great position at the Pender Correctional Institution.
She was really excited about being a corrections officer, getting a steady job.
She was a great employee and she was a hard worker.
She had a bright future ahead of her.
But as secure as her work life seemed, Kiana's love life was more of a work in progress.
Kiana had been with Xavion Marshall in a long-term on-again and off-again relationship since high school.
For 23-year-olds, it's not abnormal to have an on and off again relationship, but there was no evidence that there was a lack of love there.
At the same time, Kiana struck up a friendship with an older local man named Michael Hill.
Michael was in his 50s, Kiana was in her early 20s.
He played a role as a mentor in her life, often giving her advice.
Which wasn't surprising, given that Mike was a pillar of the community.
He was pretty well known since he had grown up in Brunswick County.
He lived a good life. He had a good job.
And then a few years ago, he hit the lottery, literally.
He was actually known in the community as Money Mike since he won $10 million off of a scratch-off ticket.
But Michael's newfound wealth didn't fundamentally change his character.
All he ever wanted was a fishing boat and a pickup truck, and he did buy that for himself.
He spent $200,000 paying off his home.
but he had spent everything else on the community. He had bought four-wheelers for kids in his neighborhood, bought vehicles for people. He gave some to the church.
He was known to be very philanthropic and give back.
Kiana respected his strong values and shared an interest in his laid-back lifestyle.
She enjoyed doing the simple things with him.
Well, they go fishing, they go hunting.
As the two grew closer, Kiana also counted on Michael for relationship advice.
It just really feels like he's always playing games.
He probably is.
She would often lean on Michael for advice with Xavion.
Some men are like that. But not all of us, though.
Then one day, when Kiana and Xavion were on a break, her relationship with Michael took an unexpected turn.
They started an intimate relationship.
They really enjoyed each other's company, so they just kind of kept with it.
But now, Kiana's mother has called police to report her missing.
Hey, I'm Chief Howell. I went out to Miss Graham's house and talked to Miss Graham about her daughter.
She told him that she received the phone call from her job. That's when she began to worry.
For her not to show up, that was very alarming.
And she was not answering her phone.
She knew this was not normal. Her mother said she never hardly missed work unless she was like deathly ill. She was thinking something happened to Kiana, that she wasn't just missing.
Well, why do you think that?
She's the correction officer.
She was working in a facility that housed criminals. Her focus was that someone in the facility could possibly do her harm.
And Chief Howell is thinking the exact same thing.
Is this tied into her job? Did she miss it because somebody she had in prison had come and kidnapped her? I got a feeling that was the case.
23-year-old Kiana Graham was enjoying spending time with 52-year-old lottery winner Michael Hill.
There was a very big age gap between the two of them, but Kiana was very much so into Michael.
Kiana really enjoyed doing the simple things with him.
But now, Kiana's mother has reported her missing, and police fear the worst.
She was a correction officer.
That type of position, it lends itself to being in harm's way.
One of the inmates, originally under Kiana's supervision, could have gotten out and targeted her for revenge, money, or in a sexual crime.
Concerned, Chief Howell immediately tries to locate this young woman.
Let me make a call.
I did a missing person report, and I had the sheriff's office try to ping her phone. The phone was not on.
Given that Kiana is in law enforcement, the stakes are high. So Chief Howell calls in the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation.
I said, look, guys, I need your help. I got this missing girl. She's a correction officer. She just vanished off the face of the earth. And they said, okay, we'll come down and assist you.
In the meantime, Kiana's mother fills the chief in on Kiana's plans the day before.
When you start talking about a guy she's been dating, Mike Hill.
Mom knew Michael Hill from the community and had seen him with Kiana. She knew that there was some type of relationship there.
She said she was supposed to meet him the previous afternoon before work.
My captain was good friends with Mike, and Mike would come stop by the PD sometime to see him, and that's how I met Mike. I didn't know him good enough to know that he was dating Kiana, but he seemed to be a nice guy, seemed to be personable.
Well, did you talk to him before you realized Kiana was missing?
Yes.
Kiana's mother called him.
Have you talked to her?
She called asking him if he had seen Kiana.
She's not answering it.
Michael told her mother that he didn't know what was going on or where she was.
But Michael Hill isn't the only man in Kiana's life.
Kiana was in an on-again, off-again relationship since high school with Xavion.
Police need to talk to both men. Michael can't be reached, so the chief makes a call to Xavion.
But they gotta run it through all the questions and really get to the bottom of the situation.
When asked if he knew where Kiana could be, he says no.
I talked to Xavion on the phone that morning. He said he hadn't seen her or talked to her.
While the investigator may harbor doubts about his story, the case is about to take a tragic turn.
I was still doing follow-ups.
But then, the chief gets a call from dispatch.
This is Chief Howell.
But they had found a deceased female in a hotel in Charlotte.
And she was face down on the bed in a pool of blood.
When looking at the ID, they were able to identify the body as Kiana.
Okay, thank you.
Chief Howell is charged with the difficult task of breaking the news to Kiana's mother.
We told her that her daughter had been found and was deceased.
She was devastated. That's her little girl, and she's gone now.
I really felt bad for her. Her mother's really, really good, nice people. Kiana was too.
The Navassa police chief remains with Kiana's mother, while a Charlotte detective and North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation agent begin their examination of the crime scene.
Kiana was found in bed with her head face down.
It was pretty chilling, just the way she was laying there.
You could clearly see that there was a large hole in the back of her head.
She had been shot, and it appeared she was asleep or falling asleep and likely didn't see it coming. It was basically like an execution.
When they turn her over, a .45 projectile comes out of her mouth.
But there was no gun at the scene. It seemed that she had been deceased for a while.
One thing found inside the room points to a potential suspect.
Along with Kiana's ID, there was a second ID with a name, Xavion Marshall.
That's when Chief Howell arrives at the scene.
He shares some information with them.
Kiana's mother had told him more about her boyfriend, Michael Hill.
Michael Hill isn't just Kiana's boyfriend.
He is currently married as well.
Police in Charlotte, North Carolina have only begun to investigate the complicated murder case of 23-year-old Kiana Graham.
At first, police thought she had been targeted because of her job as a correction officer. But now, they aren't so sure.
Check this out.
Inside her hotel room, they found the driver's license of a man named Xavion Marshall.
Chief Howell, who had questioned Kiana's mother, was able to tell them that he was an on-again, off-again boyfriend of Kiana's. But that isn't all. He also reveals that Kiana was dating a man named Michael Hill,
which immediately leads police to consider a possible motive.
There might have been a love triangle.
But the plot thickens because Michael is also a married man.
Did Michael's wife find out about his affair and relationship with Kiana? Did she want revenge?
Investigators hope requesting the hotel surveillance footage will provide some answers.
The hotel had a video system.
They were pulling all of the surveillance footage to see if anyone came in and out of the room.
In the meantime, police confirm the hotel room was registered to Michael Hill.
At this point, it is now their #1 priority to find Michael Hill.
As police try to locate him, news of the murder spreads through Charlotte.
It's a small community, low crime area. People are close. That murder really shook the town of Charlotte.
So as soon as detectives track Michael down, they bring him in for questioning.
He was calm and cool.
They started by asking him about his relationship with Kiana.
They want him to paint a picture of what their relationship was like.
He's just a straight shooter. He just owns up to it totally.
Her and Mr. Hill had an ongoing, on and off again romantic relationship.
How long you guys been off and on now?
About a year and a half.
Yeah. Year and a half.
The affair actually started when he and his wife, Jackie, were going through tough times.
Michael describes his relationship with Kiana as a breath of fresh air.
She was a really nice person. He said that they enjoyed doing many things together and just living a simple life.
And he said that she was one of the few people in his life who didn't want to run his pockets.
Sound like you really loved her.
Yeah, I love her.
The investigators wonder if Kiana felt the same way.
She swore down she didn't love me.
Though Michael admits one thing made him doubt the sincerity of Kiana's feelings: her relationship with Xavion Marshall.
She would only reach out, according to Michael, when she was on the outs with Xavion.
Have they been on the outs recently?
Yeah, the whole reason we even got together this particular time, but she was like, I don't know, I might give him a chance. I'm like, why would you even go running back to this guy? I said, she was since high school. But then she'd be like, he get on my nerves.
And even then, she never completely cut Xavion off.
Kiana was still communicating with Xavion, chatting on and off again through social media platforms,
which caused a lot of the tension with Mr. Hill.
He just got really, really tired of it.
After that, I was like, man, you love that guy. You might as well just go ahead and do it.
Finally, Michael says he gave Kiana an ultimatum.
It was coming to a point where it's like, listen, you are my lady. And this other guy, Xavion, he needs to get out of the picture.
But Michael says Kiana refused to commit. So 3 weeks ago, he'd ended the relationship.
Sound like Kiana just didn't know what she wanted.
Kiana, it's a mixed bag because I don't know if she know what she wants.
He couldn't deal with it anymore.
That's it, I'm done.
After that, Michael claims he had no contact with Kiana until Sunday.
She texted him saying that she missed him and she really wanted to see him. And he told her that they could get together the next day.
According to Michael, he agreed to make a reservation for them at a hotel.
This was something that they often did.
You check in around 10:30, then you go wait in the parking lot. She shows up around 11:30. You guys go in.
They meet up and just enjoyed each other.
Michael said he stayed with Kiana as long as he could, but when he left, she stayed at the hotel.
Her plan was to get some shut-eye before she had to go to work that night.
So detectives need to determine what time Michael left the hotel.
Yesterday I want to say about 2-something. About 2-something yesterday.
And he says that when he left, Kiana was alive and well.
Michael said he didn't know that anything was wrong until he got a phone call from Kiana's mother asking where her daughter was.
Michael is taken aback because Kiana said she was going to go to sleep and go to work.
Once again, he told Kiana's mother that he had no idea where she was.
But it wasn't long after that he received a call from a friend with shocking news.
From who? It was just a friend of mine called me and said, man, do you realize that they found Kiana dead?
Who do you think could have done this?
I don't know, man. I don't know, man.
Did you kill her, Mom?
I didn't kill her.
In fact, he insists investigators are barking up the wrong tree.
Michael explains The guy you probably want to be talking to is Xavion. Kiana had told him he was crazy.
In Charlotte, North Carolina, Michael Hill, the boyfriend of murder victim Kiana Graham, has told police she was afraid of the other man she was seeing, Xavion Marshall.
On one particular occasion, she contacted Michael to let him know that she was concerned because Xavion was stalking her.
And he asked Kiana, do you need me to come and handle this situation, come get you? She's like, no.
I'm on the phone with her. I said, listen, man. I said, I can call somebody. She said, no. I said, do you want me to come over there? She said, no, it don't make things worse.
But Michael says that recently, things had worsened between Kiana and Xavion.
He says just days earlier, Xavion wouldn't let her out of the car during the argument.
He said Kiana actually had to call the police on Xavion.
Week before last, she called me. She said, you know, I called the police on him the other day, right? Because he wouldn't let me out my car. I said, what?
Could Xavion have followed Kiana to the hotel and killed her?
Maybe Xavion found out about Kiana and Michael and came to the hotel and in a jealous rage, killed her.
There is already evidence Xavion may have been there.
They found Xavion's ID in her purse.
And he could have easily learned she was there for a tryst with Michael.
Steal any guns or?
The country boy.
He said Xavion, being a country boy, he carried weapons just like himself.
But investigators can't be sure Michael is telling the truth about Xavion.
Maybe Michael's wife has gotten wind of this relationship. Maybe she is the one who committed this crime.
Does she know anything about that?
He immediately cuts them off.
Michael informed the officers that his wife didn't know about Kiana.
He was sure that she had nothing to do with this.
But detectives wonder, was Michael's wife as in the dark as he claimed?
Police have to do their job.
Investigators go to the home Michael shares with his wife Jackie to question her.
Hi, can I help you?
She told him that she knew Kiana from around town, but didn't know her personally.
And Jackie definitely didn't know that her husband was sleeping with her.
Excuse me?
She said she knew absolutely nothing about the relationship between Michael and Kiana.
She is completely just blown away at this news that her husband is cheating on her. And as well, this situation involves his mistress being murdered.
And with that,
thank you for your time.
She has no motive to be the perpetrator of this crime.
Detectives were able to rule out Jackie.
But before police can make their next move, a friend of Kiana's named Carol comes forward with what might be a break in the case.
She says, look, if anybody is doing any stalking, it wasn't Xavion, it was Michael.
She says that Michael often threatened Kiana.
And she even heard Michael say, if I can't have you, nobody can.
In Charlotte, North Carolina, a friend of Kiana Graham's has just told detectives that Kiana had an abusive relationship with Michael Hill.
It was a textbook domestic violence relationship. He was manipulative, he was jealous.
He became pretty much a control freak over this young woman.
He bought her clothes that he wanted her to wear. He wanted to know where she was, who her friends were, and where she went.
Oftentimes, Kiana would ignore his calls, but he found some way to contact her. He would call from other numbers.
He was physically stalking this woman.
And what Carol tells police wasn't just hearsay. Michael had come after her and Kiana's other friends, too.
We tried to get them to break up.
When her friends were encouraging her to walk away from the relationship, Michael would often threaten the friend group, and she oftentimes saw Michael with a gun.
There were times when Carol had also heard Michael directly threaten Kiana.
He said he was going to kill her if she didn't leave her boyfriend.
But Carol admits she never saw nor heard Kiana complain of physical abuse.
This case was an important domestic violence case because it wasn't physical abuse that led to Kiana's death. It was emotional.
That's very dangerous. When they're controlling your every move, you have an issue.
And when investigators are finally able to review the security footage from the hotel, they are all but certain Michael is her killer.
They were able to see Michael on camera.
He was the only person who came in and out of that room before Miss Graham was found.
With probable cause, detectives get a warrant for his arrest.
They also get a search warrant to check out his house.
Michael isn't there, but his wife lets police inside.
She was very helpful, but you could really see in her face that she could not believe that Mike had killed Kiana.
Inside, detectives find an arsenal of guns belonging to Michael.
They found over 100 guns.
More confident than ever, detectives use cell phone tracking data to pinpoint their suspect's location.
They tracked his phone to Southport. He was at the waterfront.
Worried he could be armed and dangerous, investigators employ a secret weapon. Chief Deputy Charlie Miller.
He knew Mr. Hill from the community.
They grew up together, actually several houses down from each other.
He actually approached Mr. Hill first since he knew him.
I'm sorry, man, but you're under arrest.
He doesn't resist. He doesn't give him any problems. He lets them take him on in.
We are very grateful that he is the one that found him.
Especially because inside Michael's truck, there's evidence this could have ended differently.
He had several firearms loaded at the time.
One was a pistol and one was the assault rifle.
We believe that he was planning suicide by a cop.
Continuing our coverage tonight.
News of the arrest shakes this small community.
When people started learning about what happened to her, there was a lot of people that were really upset and having a hard time with this.
For him to kill her because he was jealous and had no control over her at that point was horrific.
Face to face with detectives, Michael continues to insist on his innocence.
He still denies it. He says he didn't kill Kiana.
That's when investigators confront him with the video evidence against him.
They say, look, you're the only person we see who had gone in and out of that room.
You're the only person that can tell me what happened in that room to the woman you love.
His whole demeanor changed.
Mr. Hill sort of put his head down and sighed and then began to tell the truth of what actually happened.
You expect things to change, and then you wake up, figure it all out, all the games from the beginning.
Michael resented Kiana. He was willing to walk away from his wife, who was a loving woman, to be with her.
I really fell in love with her. I fell in love with her. But she wasn't in love with nobody. Really? Yeah.
She was telling him that she was in love with him. Yet he would oftentimes find her communicating with Xavion in his presence.
He was very jealous. He felt like Kiana was playing him.
And though Michael previously told police Kiana wasn't after his money, he now claimed she was.
How much money you think you spending tomorrow? A lot. A whole lot.
Of course, without Kiana there to defend herself, and with Michael suddenly changing his story to paint her as a gold digger, we can't know what the real truth is.
But Michael makes it clear that the day of the murder, his resentment against Kiana for continuing the relationship with Xavion boiled over.
He got upset because she was talking with him on her phone. They had a few words about it.
That's really none of your business.
The hell it ain't.
She told him they were finished talking about him, and he told him she was going to lay down and go to sleep. She had to go to work at 6 o'clock.
Michael was angry and he was hurt.
He was beginning to unravel at this point.
I got up, I said, I'm going to smoke a cigar. So whatever, just make sure you cut the lights off. I don't know, I guess just touch something in it. I reached down in my book bag, pulled out the 45, reached over to the shower.
"52-year-old lottery winner Michael Hill has just confessed to shooting his 23-year-old girlfriend, Kiana Graham, in a jealous rage over her talking to her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Xavion Marshall.
He got upset because he felt like she was talking with him. Then she was going to sleep and told him to turn the lights off. He pulled out the 45 that he had in his bag and he shot her in the back of the head.
She did not have an opportunity to fight back.
She never saw it coming.
Did you check the 6 years date? I didn't even look at it. I didn't look.
He grabbed his things and he walked out of the hotel room.
Fleeing the scene, Michael was sure he'd be stopped.
There were people in the hallway. However, they must not have heard the noise or thought it was something else.
Michael says he immediately went to dispose of the gun.
Where'd you throw it out again? Down in the river.
He went down a dirt road in Navassa and threw the gun into the Cape Fear River there.
After that, Michael says he couldn't face going home.
He said he drove around
and he spent the night in his truck.
Then he hatched a plan.
Michael explains he had been in prison before.
In the 80s and 90s, he had been convicted of some property crimes and a robbery.
I'm not going back to prison. So I can't live in prison.
So he went and bought firearms as part of his suicide by cop plan.
He was planning to jump out of his vehicle with a firearm and pray that the police would shoot and kill him. But when he saw Charlie Miller, he said he couldn't do that to his friend and gave up without incident.
It could have been a much worse situation. We were very grateful that it ended the way it did.
Continuing to build their case against Michael, investigators try to locate the murder weapon.
Bronson County Sheriff's Office come out and assist with a dive team. Those deputies and those officers dove 3 or 4, maybe even 5 times trying to locate the firearm.
But they were unable to locate it.
On July 21st, 2020, Michael is charged with first-degree murder.
An element of first-degree murder is that there has to be premeditation.
Michael claims that he killed Kiana in the heat of the moment. It wasn't planned, but premeditated murder is not just the act of planning it out, but also thinking about it.
Michael Hill in the past said that he was going to kill her if she didn't leave her boyfriend.
So the prosecutor in this situation believed that first-degree murder was appropriate.
With Michael behind bars, the community mourns Kiana's loss.
There was a lot of love and support for Kiana. She had a good-sized funeral.
As the case moves to trial, Michael surprises everyone by enlisting a public defender.
It was a shock given that he won the lottery in 2017.
He won $10 million.
Once taxes are taken out of it, it's more than $4 million.
He had actually spent a lot of that money, and he gave a lot of it away.
Though Michael hopes to negotiate a plea, prosecutors insist on taking the case to trial.
We believe that was the appropriate thing to do because essentially Kiana was executed in cold blood, and we did not feel he deserved anything less than life.
In May of 2022, when Michael's trial opens in a Brunswick County courtroom, it opens old wounds for Kiana's family.
Her family was present at the trial. Trials are always difficult for victims of homicide. They have to hear all the evidence of how the homicide occurred. That can be extremely difficult.
In front of the jury, the prosecution paints Kiana's murder as a classic case of domestic violence.
Michael was very possessive, and this was a woman he wanted to completely control. And if he could not, he was going to kill her, and that's what he did.
Though Michael may not have initially planned Kiana's murder that day, he made a conscious decision to kill her after an alleged betrayal.
They had got into an argument. She wouldn't leave her boyfriend, and he said he just got fed up and shot her.
To prove Michael's guilt, the prosecution presents overwhelming evidence.
They first called Kiana's friend Carol to the stand.
She talked about her relationship with Mr. Hill, how he was controlling, how he was jealous, how they were concerned for her safety, and he had threatened to kill her at one point. We watched surveillance footage where they discovered Mr. Hill was the only one who went in and out of that room, and then we subsequently interviewed him for several hours about what had happened, and he had confessed to the entire homicide.
Given the facts, it's no surprise when the jury returns with a guilty verdict.
He was found guilty of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Although Kiana's family is satisfied with the verdict, no punishment will ever be enough.
There's really no justice that can bring back the life of an individual.
She was cheated out of a whole lot, and her family and friends were cheated out of the opportunity to see what she would become down the road.
She'll be missed in the community and is missed to this day.
On the evening of March 1st, 1932, the quiet countryside outside Hopewell, New Jersey, seemed far removed from the noise and attention that surrounded the Lindbergh family. Their home stood on a large estate, surrounded by trees, fields, and winding roads. It was a place where the family expected privacy. Yet that night, somewhere beyond the walls of the house, an unknown person was preparing to enter their lives in a way that would change American history forever. The center of the family was Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr., a 20-month-old boy known affectionately as Charles Jr. His father, Charles Lindbergh, was one of the most famous men in the world. In 1927, he had completed the first solo nonstop flight across the Atlantic Ocean, transforming himself almost overnight into an international celebrity. His fame brought admiration, wealth, and constant public attention. His wife, Maura Lindbergh, was also well known, but the family tried to maintain a private life away from crowds and reporters. Their rural home near Hopewell was intended to provide exactly that. The estate was spacious and secluded. The isolation offered peace, but it also created vulnerabilities, with fewer neighbors to notice strangers and long stretches of darkness surrounding the property during those crucial hours. Inside the house that evening, life appeared ordinary. Charles Jr. had been placed in his nursery on the second floor. His parents were nearby, along with members of the household staff. Nothing suggested that the child was in immediate danger. There had been no warning, no obvious threat, and no confrontation. The family had no reason to believe that someone was watching the house. But someone was. At some point that night, an intruder approached the nursery window from outside. Investigators would later reconstruct the entry using the physical evidence left behind. The person had brought a homemade wooden ladder and positioned it against the house. The ladder was not a professional piece of equipment. It was assembled from several pieces of wood, and its construction would later become one of the most important clues in the investigation. The intruder climbed toward the second floor. The nursery window became the point of entry. Once inside, the kidnapper found the sleeping child and removed him from the room. Exactly what happened during those moments has never been completely witnessed or recorded. No member of the household saw the abduction itself. There was no photograph, no direct eyewitness account, and no surviving confession that established every detail of the crime. The silence of the house concealed the crime for a time. The first sign that something was wrong came later that evening. Betty Gao, the child's nurse, went to check on him and discovered that the crib was empty. At first, the absence may have seemed impossible. Charles Jr. was supposed to be there. The room was familiar. The household was secure. Yet the child was gone. The adults began searching. The nursery quickly became the center of attention. On or near the windowsill, investigators found a handwritten ransom note. The message demanded $50,000 in exchange for the child's safe return. The note also contained unusual markings that would become part of the investigation. The discovery transformed a family emergency into a criminal case. Charles Lindbergh was immediately confronted with a nightmare that seemed impossible to comprehend. His son had not wandered away. Someone had entered the house, taken him from his bed, and disappeared into the darkness. The physical evidence was disturbing but incomplete. Outside the nursery was a wooden ladder used by the kidnapper to reach the window. Investigators noticed that the ladder had been damaged, with one portion broken. Inside the nursery, there were signs that someone had entered through the window. Investigators examined the room and the surrounding ground for fingerprints, footprints, fibers, and other traces. Yet the crime scene did not immediately reveal the identity of the intruder. That uncertainty was terrifying. The family now faced a decision that would become central to the case: whether to cooperate with the kidnapper. The ransom demand was clear. The child was presumably alive, and the person responsible wanted money. News of the kidnapping spread rapidly. Because Charles Lindbergh was internationally famous, the disappearance of his son became a national sensation almost immediately. Reporters gathered around the estate. Police received information from strangers across the country. People claimed to have seen the child, the kidnapper, the ladder, suspicious vehicles, or mysterious individuals. Many of these reports were useless. Some were sincere mistakes. Others were attempts to exploit the family's desperation. The case became larger than the police could easily control. Meanwhile, the Lindbergh family had to live with uncertainty. Every passing hour increased the fear that Charles Jr. might be injured or killed. The ransom note had created a terrible possibility. The kidnapper had planned the crime carefully enough to enter a famous family's home, remove a child, and leave without being stopped. The amount demanded, $50,000, was enormous in 1932. For the Lindbergh family, the money was secondary. Their priority was bringing their son home. Further communication from the kidnapper would follow. The messages were written in a distinctive manner, and the writer appeared to understand that the family had access to the money. The ransom instructions would eventually lead to a series of negotiations involving an intermediary, but at this early stage, nobody knew whether the person holding Charles Jr. intended to return him. The most painful question remained unanswered. Where was the child? Outside, the New Jersey countryside remained dark and quiet. Somewhere beyond the estate, the kidnapper had vanished with a toddler who could not possibly understand what was happening. Inside the house, the nursery that had been a place of safety had become a crime scene. The wooden ladder stood as a silent reminder of the intrusion. The ransom note offered a voice without a face, and the empty crib provided the most devastating evidence of all. As investigators began examining every detail, they could not yet know that this case would consume the attention of the entire country. They could not know that the investigation would stretch across state lines, involve thousands of leads, and eventually produce one of the most famous criminal trials in American history. They also could not know that the child they were desperately trying to recover would never return alive. For the moment, however, hope remained. The family believed there was still a chance. The kidnapper had asked for money rather than announcing an intention to kill. The ransom demand suggested that Charles Jr. had been taken for a purpose, and every new message might contain a clue about his location. The investigation therefore began with a simple objective: find the child and bring him home. Police officers examined the property. Detectives questioned members of the household. The latter was preserved as evidence. The ransom note was studied. Every possible route away from the estate had to be considered. Investigators wondered how the kidnapper had approached the house, where an escape vehicle might have been waiting, and whether someone had helped from inside. Nothing was certain. The famous name of Lindbergh brought enormous attention, but fame did not make the family immune to tragedy. It may have made them a more attractive target. The kidnapper knew that Charles Lindbergh had money and that the disappearance of his child would generate extraordinary pressure. By the end of that night, the Lindbergh household had been transformed. A child's bedroom had become the center of a mystery. A family that had sought privacy was suddenly surrounded by investigators and reporters. A quiet estate had become the scene of a crime that would dominate newspapers across America. The search for Charles Jr. was only beginning. In the days ahead, letters would arrive, money would be demanded, intermediaries would become involved, and the investigation would move far beyond New Jersey. Eventually, a ransom payment would take place under extraordinary circumstances. But none of that was known on the first night. At that moment, there was only an empty nursery, a broken ladder, a ransom note, and a family waiting for word that their little boy was alive. The darkness around the Lindbergh estate seemed endless. And somewhere beyond it, the person who had taken Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr. was already disappearing into history. The morning after Charles Lindbergh Jr. disappeared, the estate near Hopewell no longer felt like a family home. It had become the center of an extraordinary investigation. Police officers, detectives, reporters, photographers, neighbors, and curious strangers gathered around the property. Every person who entered seemed to bring another question. Where had the kidnapper gone? Had an accomplice been waiting nearby? Was the child still alive? And how could someone have entered a famous man's home, taken his sleeping son, and escaped without being seen? Inside the nursery, investigators continued to examine the scene. The ransom note was preserved because it could contain clues about the writer. The wooden ladder outside the house received even greater attention. It was crude and unusual, and investigators suspected that the person who built it might eventually be identified through the materials and construction. The ladder had broken during the operation, suggesting that the kidnapper had taken a considerable risk while climbing to the second floor. The physical evidence was important, but the investigators faced an immediate problem. There was no reliable eyewitness to the kidnapping. No one had watched the intruder climb the ladder. No one had seen the person carrying the child away. The darkness and isolation surrounding the estate had given the kidnapper an enormous advantage. Charles Lindbergh was determined to recover his son. The family understood that the ransom demand was their strongest connection to whoever had taken Charles Jr. They therefore had to treat the anonymous criminal not simply as an enemy, but as someone with whom they might need to communicate. Every word in the ransom note mattered. Every symbol, spelling choice, and instruction could reveal something about the writer. The original demand was $50,000. That amount was already enormous, but the family was prepared to consider payment if it meant bringing their child home. The police also understood that an uncontrolled response could place Charles Jr. in greater danger. They needed information, but they could not afford to frighten the kidnapper into silence. As news spread, the case became a national obsession. Newspapers placed the kidnapping on their front pages. Radio broadcasts carried updates to millions of listeners. People who had never met the Lindbergh family suddenly followed every development. The public wanted answers, and the pressure on investigators grew with each passing day. The enormous attention produced both help and confusion. Genuine witnesses came forward with potentially useful information. At the same time, hundreds of people reported rumors, false sightings, and stories that could not be verified. Some claimed to know where the child was being held. Others claimed to have recognized the kidnapper. Investigators had to sort real evidence from imagination. The Lindbergh name made the situation even more complicated. Charles Lindbergh's fame meant that almost every detail of the case attracted publicity. His reputation as an aviation hero had made him a symbol of courage and achievement, but now the public saw him as a frightened father searching for his child. Newspapers followed his movements closely, sometimes making the investigation more difficult. Then another problem emerged. The family needed someone who could communicate with the kidnapper without placing Charles Lindbergh directly in danger. A man named John F. Condon, a retired school principal and former educator from the Bronx, became involved after offering to act as an intermediary. Condon had seen the newspaper coverage and believed he might be able to help. The kidnapper eventually communicated with Condon. The correspondence confirmed that the person behind the crime was watching developments and was willing to negotiate. Condon began writing messages and receiving instructions. The relationship was strange because neither side could fully trust the other. Condon did not know the kidnapper's identity, while the kidnapper had no reason to trust a stranger acting on behalf of the Lindbergh family. Yet the communication continued. The ransom demand was later increased to $70,000. This change suggested that the criminal believed the family could pay more. It also demonstrated that the kidnapping was not a spontaneous act. Whoever had planned it had thought about money, communication, and the family's ability to respond. One of the most important moments came when the kidnapper provided proof that Charles Jr. was still in his possession. A child's sleeping garment was delivered to Condon, who showed it to the Lindbergh family. The family recognized it as belonging to their son. That confirmation brought both hope and terror. Hope came from the possibility that Charles Jr. was alive. Terror came from knowing that a stranger was still controlling his fate. The garment proved that the kidnapper had access to the child, but it did not reveal where he was being held. The investigation therefore became a race against time. Police needed to identify the person behind the letters, while the family needed to satisfy the kidnapper's demands. Investigators examined the handwriting closely. The unusual language and symbols in the letters were noted. Some investigators believed the writing might eventually become one of the strongest ways to identify the author. Meanwhile, detectives continued searching the surrounding countryside. They examined roads, fields, wooded areas, and possible escape routes. The question of how the kidnapper had arrived and departed was particularly important. If a vehicle had been used, someone might eventually remember seeing it. If the criminal had walked away, investigators needed to know how far he could have traveled while carrying a small child. The latter remained one of the strangest pieces of evidence. It appeared to have been constructed specifically for the crime, yet its design was imperfect. Investigators later examined the wood and workmanship in extraordinary detail. At this early stage, however, they could not identify its maker. The public investigation also attracted people who wanted to profit from the tragedy. Some individuals attempted to sell information to newspapers. Others contacted the family claiming they could recover the child. There were also people who tried to exploit the ransom situation for personal gain. Investigators had to consider the possibility that the kidnapping had inspired additional crimes. For the Lindbergh family, all of this noise was secondary. Their world had narrowed to one question: where was their son? Charles Jr. had disappeared from his nursery, but there was still no confirmed information about his location. The ransom negotiations created the impression that a solution might be possible. If the family followed the instructions and paid the money, perhaps the child would be returned. The next stage of the negotiations would take Condon into New York City. The kidnapper instructed him to deliver the ransom personally. Condon agreed. The amount was prepared, and arrangements were made for the exchange. The meeting would be unlike anything the investigators had experienced. Condon was about to meet the mysterious person who had been communicating through letters, but he would have to do so without knowing whether the stranger was telling the truth. On the night of the planned exchange, the uncertainty was overwhelming. Condon knew that the money was real and that the child might be waiting somewhere nearby. He also knew that the person meeting him could disappear immediately after receiving the ransom. The man eventually appeared and identified himself only as John. Condon handed over the money. In return, he received a message concerning the child's supposed location. According to the instructions, Charles Jr. was being held aboard a boat named Nellie, supposedly near Martha's Vineyard. It was an extraordinary claim. If true, the child could potentially be recovered quickly. Condon returned with the information, and efforts began to verify it. But the promised reunion never happened. The search for the boat produced no sign of Charles Jr. The location described by the kidnapper did not provide the answer the family desperately needed. Instead, another mystery had been added to the case. By then, the investigation had crossed from the quiet countryside of New Jersey into a much larger national search. Police had a ransom note, a damaged ladder, mysterious letters, an unknown man named John, and a child whose whereabouts remained uncertain. The family still had reason to hope, but the first major ransom exchange had failed to bring Charles Jr. home. And as the days passed, the possibility that the child might not survive became increasingly difficult to ignore. The investigators did not yet know that the most devastating discovery was still weeks away, waiting silently beneath the New Jersey landscape. The investigation continued relentlessly. The ransom exchange had failed to produce the one thing the Lindbergh family wanted most: the return of their son. The man calling himself John had claimed that Charles Jr. was being held aboard a boat near Martha's Vineyard, but searches found no trace of the child. The kidnapping had now entered a dangerous new phase. For investigators, the failed exchange created a difficult question. Had the kidnapper deliberately sent them to the wrong place, or had something gone terribly wrong before the child could be recovered? The investigation continued under enormous public pressure. Newspapers followed every development, and reporters surrounded the Lindbergh property and pursued information from police, witnesses, and anyone who claimed to know something. The family's private tragedy had become a national spectacle. Yet publicity could not answer the central question of the case. Where was Charles Jr.? Detectives returned repeatedly to the original crime scene. The nursery remained crucial because the kidnapper had left physical evidence behind. The damaged ladder was examined carefully. Its construction appeared amateurish, but it was strong enough to support a person climbing to the second floor. One section had broken, and investigators wondered whether the damage had occurred during the kidnapping. If they could identify the person who built the ladder, they might identify the kidnapper. The ransom letters were equally important to the investigators. Their handwriting was distinctive, and investigators began preserving every communication for later comparison. The writer appeared to use unusual spelling, punctuation, and symbols. At the time, forensic handwriting analysis was far less developed than it would become in later decades, but investigators still understood that handwriting could provide a valuable connection between an anonymous criminal and a real person. Meanwhile, authorities expanded their search beyond the immediate area. Roads leading away from the Lindbergh estate were examined. Investigators considered whether the kidnapper had used a waiting automobile or another method of transportation. They questioned people who had been near the property on the night of March 1st. Every unusual vehicle, stranger, and suspicious movement became a potential lead. The problem was that the country was producing far more information than investigators could process. People called with stories that contradicted one another. Some reported seeing children who resembled Charles Jr. Others claimed that a stranger had confessed to them. Still others offered elaborate theories about the kidnapping. Most of these leads went nowhere. There was still no confirmed sighting of Charles Jr. since the night he disappeared. The clothing delivered during the negotiations had established that the kidnapper had possessed something belonging to the child, but it did not establish where the boy was at the time of the exchange. The possibility remained that he was alive somewhere, perhaps being held in a remote location. Then, on May 12th, the case changed forever. That morning, a truck driver traveling near Mount Rose, not far from the Lindbergh estate, noticed something unusual beside the road. The area was wooded and relatively isolated. The body of a small child was discovered there. Authorities were called, and the discovery quickly became connected to the Lindbergh kidnapping. Investigators soon identified the remains as Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr. The child had been missing for more than 2 months. Now the search for a living victim had become a murder investigation. The discovery was devastating. The ransom negotiations had created hope that Charles Jr. might be returned safely. Instead, investigators now understood that he had not survived. The location of the body was significant. It was only a few miles from the Lindbergh home, meaning that the child had not necessarily been transported across the country or hidden in some distant place. The person responsible had apparently been close to the family from the beginning. The condition of the remains made reconstruction difficult. The child had suffered severe decomposition, but medical examinations still provided crucial information. Investigators determined that Charles Jr. had died from a major head injury. The evidence suggested that his death had occurred around the time of the kidnapping, rather than shortly before his body was discovered. That conclusion transformed the meaning of the ransom letters. If the child had died soon after being taken, then the person demanding money had been negotiating while knowing that the boy was already dead. For the Lindbergh family, this possibility was unbearable. They had spent weeks believing that the ransom might save their son. They had followed instructions, negotiated through an intermediary, and watched the investigation expand across the country. Yet their child had been dead all along. Investigators now had another question. How had Charles Jr. died? There was no definitive eyewitness account. The kidnapper had not been identified. The body had been discovered outdoors after weeks of exposure. The exact sequence between the moment the child was removed from the nursery and the moment of death remained uncertain. The police returned to the physical evidence with new urgency. The latter became more important than ever in the investigation. So did the ransom notes and the money. The crime had initially appeared to be a carefully planned kidnapping for financial gain. The child's death suggested that something had gone catastrophically wrong, although investigators could not immediately determine whether the fatal injury had been accidental or deliberate. The case now required a suspect who could be connected to all of these pieces. Authorities examined the ransom payments. The money had been specially prepared, and investigators believed that some of the bills could eventually be recognized if they entered circulation. The kidnapper had received a substantial amount of cash, but spending that money carried a risk. Currency leaves traces, especially when unusual or identifiable forms of payment are involved. This would eventually become one of the most important weaknesses in the kidnapper's plan. For now, however, the investigation remained without an identified suspect. Public anger intensified. The Lindbergh case became a symbol of vulnerability, demonstrating that even one of America's most famous families could be targeted inside its own home. The discovery also increased pressure on federal authorities. The kidnapping had crossed state boundaries through the ransom investigation and generated nationwide attention. Federal investigators began assisting with aspects of the case, bringing additional resources and developing forensic methods into an investigation that had already become one of the largest criminal inquiries of its era. The letters were preserved. The handwriting was studied. The ladder was analyzed. The ransom bills were tracked. Witnesses were interviewed again. Investigators searched for connections between the construction of the ladder and people with the necessary skills. They also examined individuals who might have known the Lindbergh family's routines. The central theory remained straightforward. Someone had watched the family closely enough to know when the child would be vulnerable, entered the nursery, removed him, and escaped. The ransom letters indicated preparation and planning. Yet the death of the child introduced an element of uncertainty. Had the kidnapper intended to kill him, or had the child died during the abduction? No answer could be proven immediately or conclusively. The investigation therefore entered a new and much darker phase. The objective was no longer to rescue Charles Jr., it was to identify the person responsible for his death and bring that person to justice. The Lindbergh estate, once intended as a refuge from public attention, had become permanently associated with this tragedy. The nursery was no longer simply a child's room. The broken ladder was no longer an isolated object. The ransom letters were no longer negotiations for a safe return. Together, they formed the pieces of a murder investigation. The breakthrough would not come from a dramatic confession or a witness who had seen the kidnapping. It would come from something much more ordinary: money. The ransom bills had entered the world beyond the Lindbergh estate, and every time one of them changed hands, it created another opportunity for the investigation to follow the trail. The kidnapper had escaped into anonymity, but the money he received could not remain invisible forever. By the summer of 1934, more than 2 years after Charles Jr. was taken, investigators were still searching for the person behind the crime. The case had become older, but it had not disappeared. Then a single piece of currency would draw attention at a New York gas station. A routine transaction in the city would produce a license plate number. That number would eventually lead investigators to a man named Bruno Richard Hauptmann. The long search for the Lindbergh kidnapper was about to enter its most consequential and dramatic stage. By the summer of 1934, the Lindbergh kidnapping had become a case that seemed to have no ending. More than 2 years had passed since Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr. was carried from his nursery, and the investigation had already crossed state boundaries, involved thousands of interviews, and generated an enormous collection of evidence. The investigation had become a national obsession. Who had entered the Lindbergh home, taken the boy, demanded money, and ultimately caused his death? The answer would begin to emerge from something deceptively ordinary: the ransom money. When the Lindbergh family paid the ransom, the money did not disappear. It entered circulation, and every person who spent one of those bills created a possible trail. Investigators had recorded identifying information about the currency, particularly because much of the payment consisted of gold certificates. At the time, gold certificates were recognizable and increasingly unusual in ordinary transactions. Their circulation could therefore attract attention. For months, however, the trail remained frustratingly quiet. The investigation had generated enormous public interest, but no single piece of evidence had produced a definitive suspect. The kidnapper had managed to remain hidden while the ransom money gradually moved through the economy. Then, in September 1934, a seemingly routine transaction changed the direction of the case. A man entered a gas station in New York City and used a gold certificate to pay for gasoline. The attendant became suspicious. Gold certificates were unusual enough that the payment stood out. Instead of simply accepting the bill and forgetting the customer, the attendant examined it more carefully. The attendant, however, had noticed something important. The bill appeared to be one of the ransom certificates connected to the Lindbergh kidnapping. Rather than confronting the man, the attendant recorded the license plate number of his automobile. That decision became one of the most important moments in the entire investigation. The license plate was reported to authorities. Investigators traced the vehicle to a man living in the Bronx. His name was Bruno Richard Hauptmann. Hauptmann was 35 years old. He was a German immigrant who had settled in the United States and worked as a carpenter. He was not a notorious gangster or publicly known criminal mastermind. He lived an ordinary life, worked with his hands, and maintained a household in the Bronx. But investigators now had a reason to look more closely at him. Detectives began examining Hauptmann's financial circumstances and movements. They wanted to know how he had obtained the gold certificate and whether he possessed other ransom money. A single bill might have been explained away as coincidence, but a larger quantity of ransom currency would be much harder to dismiss. Investigators searched Hauptmann's home and garage. Their findings dramatically strengthened the case against him. They discovered a large amount of the Lindbergh ransom money hidden in his possession. The total was more than $13,000. The discovery transformed Hauptmann from a person of interest into the central suspect. Yet the investigators did not stop with the money. They knew that a strong prosecution would require more than possession of ransom bills. They returned to evidence collected more than 2 years earlier at the Lindbergh estate and began looking for connections between Hauptmann and the original crime. One of the most important clues was the ladder. The homemade ladder had always fascinated investigators because it appeared to have been constructed specifically for the kidnapping. Its workmanship suggested someone with practical carpentry skills. Hauptmann was a carpenter. That fact alone did not prove anything, because many men could have possessed similar skills, but it gave investigators a reason to examine his tools, his materials, and his knowledge of construction. The ladder was carefully studied. Investigators compared its construction with materials associated with Hauptmann. They examined the wood and the way the pieces had been joined. They also considered whether the tools found in Hauptmann's possession could have been used to construct or modify the ladder. Another crucial piece of evidence involved handwriting. The kidnapper's ransom letters contained distinctive writing, including unusual spelling, punctuation, and symbols. Once Hauptmann became a suspect, investigators obtained samples of his handwriting and compared them with the ransom notes. Investigators believed that similarities existed between Hauptmann's writing and the handwriting in the ransom letters. The strange language of the letters had once been a barrier because it concealed the writer's identity. Now it could potentially work against the suspect. Hauptmann denied being the kidnapper. He had explanations for the money and circumstances surrounding him. He eventually claimed that the money was connected to a former associate named Isidore Fish. According to Hauptmann's account, Fish had left property with him before returning to Germany. Hauptmann suggested that the ransom money might have been part of what Fish had left behind. Investigators did not find the explanation convincing. The pressure on Hauptmann increased rapidly after his arrest on September 19, 1934. Newspapers across the country published his name and photographs. The public, already fascinated by the Lindbergh case, now had a suspect to focus on. The arrest also raised questions about whether the investigators had solved the crime or only found the person who possessed its proceeds. Every discovery would therefore matter, because the prosecution needed to turn suspicion into a coherent explanation of what happened. For Charles Lindbergh, the arrest represented a possible turning point. For more than 2 years, he had lived with the knowledge that the person responsible for his son's death remained free. Now investigators believed they had finally identified that person. But the case was not yet finished. The prosecution still needed to demonstrate that Hauptmann was not simply someone who had happened to possess ransom money. They needed to connect him to the kidnapping itself. The investigation therefore became an examination of every available piece of evidence. The ransom bills were particularly powerful because they were directly connected to the payment made to the kidnapper. Investigators believed the money found with Hauptmann came from the Lindbergh ransom. If that conclusion was correct, then Hauptmann had somehow obtained a substantial portion of the money given to the person responsible for the crime. The latter provided another connection. Hauptmann's profession made the construction of the homemade ladder plausible, while investigators believed certain features of the ladder corresponded with materials and tools associated with him. The handwriting evidence added another layer. Then investigators discovered another detail that appeared significant. The name and contact information of John Condon, the intermediary who had delivered the ransom money, were found written in a concealed area associated with Hauptmann's residence. This was important because Condon had communicated directly with the kidnapper. Investigators regarded the discovery as evidence that Hauptmann knew about Condon and the ransom negotiations. Each individual piece of evidence could be challenged. Together, prosecutors believed they formed a compelling chain. Yet there was still an unsettling absence. No witness had watched Hauptmann climb the ladder. No one had seen him carrying Charles Jr. from the nursery. There was no photograph showing him near the Lindbergh estate on the night of the kidnapping. The case depended heavily on circumstantial evidence. That distinction would become one of the central issues of the coming trial. As investigators prepared their case, journalists descended on Flemington, New Jersey. The town would soon become the center of the most famous criminal proceeding in the country. Crowds gathered, reporters competed for information, and the name Bruno Hauptmann became known across America. Hauptmann himself remained behind bars, maintaining that he was innocent. The Lindbergh family faced the coming trial with a different kind of uncertainty. The arrest had brought them closer to an answer, but it could not restore their son. Charles Jr. was still dead, and the circumstances surrounding his final hours remained uncertain. The prosecution would soon attempt to reconstruct the crime from fragments. A ladder left outside a nursery, letters written by an unknown hand, ransom money spent years later, and a collection of objects and observations that investigators believed pointed toward one man. For Hauptmann, the next stage would determine whether he would spend the rest of his life in prison or face execution. For the country, the trial would become a spectacle unlike almost anything that had come before it. And for the Lindbergh family, it would reopen the nightmare they had endured since the night their child disappeared. The arrest had finally given the investigation a name. Now prosecutors had to prove that the name belonged to the man who had committed the crime.